Hello. Hi. Okay. So, welcome to my talk, and welcome to day 2 of NoConf Argentina. Very excited to be here. My name is Michelle. I am a software engineer in London, working for Condé Nast International, which you might know as the publisher of Vogue magazine, helpfully cut off here. So I work on the Vogue websites, writing Node and React, very high fashion JavaScript. And here's my Twitter if you would like to tweet me nice things. So today I'm here to speak to you about Node modules, which is my favorite directory in an application. I'm going to be talking about how we choose what goes into our Node modules directory and how we can be responsible owners and curators of our Node modules. So this is something that I've been thinking about a lot in recent times because I've absorbed a lot of the general JavaScript panic about having too many dependencies, which is weird because when I first started learning Node at Node School in this very blurry photo a few years ago in London, I was told that one of the best things about writing Node was having access to this amazing ecosystem of code that other people have written and that I could use for free, which I thought was really cool. And the first modules that I ever installed were things like Happy and Express and Node1, and they made my life so much better. So after I existed in the Node world for a while, I started to hear that actually dependencies are bad, and we should actually use as few Node modules as possible. And I was hearing that we're bloating out applications with frivolous packages, and we should really just be writing like organic, vegan JavaScript with no dependencies at all. So this all made me think, if the space in my application is so valuable, how do I know if a package is good enough to npm install? And if I'm comparing two packages that essentially do the same thing, how do I choose between them? Do I choose the popular one that all the cool kids are using? It's been on Hacker News. It has like 6,000 stars on GitHub. Or do I use something else which only has like 50 stars on GitHub, but it seems kind of interesting? So in my talk today, I'm going to be speaking about the cost of modules. I'm going to be speaking about some criteria that we can use to evaluate them against each other. And I'm going to be doing some road tests of some alternatives to popular Node modules that you know and maybe love. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have everything you need to make a more informed decision next time you want to add something new to your package.json file. So we're going to start by talking about what is the cost of a module. Like, what is the actual footprint of an npm install? How does it impact my application? So we're going to start with the one which is most talked about, which is size, helpfully very large on the screen here. And this is the one that I've always heard the most about. But when I actually started looking into this and talking to people about it, I actually figured out that maybe we put too much emphasis on size over other factors for server-side modules. I understand that if you're building a React app and you want to bring some modules onto the client side, then the size is important because that's going to impact the size of your client-side JavaScript bundle. But if we're just using a module on the server, it's really just files in the server, and it's actually not the most important factor. Something that I think is more important is the complexity that a new module brings to your project. So more dependencies means more things that can break and introduce security vulnerabilities to your application. So especially when your dependencies have dependencies of their own, things get further from your control and problems are harder to find. So that's a real cost. I also think that technical costs are real, but we need to consider the human cost of adding a dependency. So first of all, installing a module is making an investment in a particular community, and you're going to be at the mercy of that community's maintainers every time you want to report a bug and have it fixed. So there's a cost. Also, installing a module raises the barrier to entry for your code base. So this means that there's more knowledge that's required to work with your code. So a new team member is going to have to learn more things in order to be productive. And that's not always a bad thing. As software developers, our job is to learn new APIs and work with them, but it's definitely a non-trivial cost. So, but that aside, I do actually love using Node modules, and I think there are lots of reasons why we should use other people's code instead of writing our own every single time. So there are problems that a wider community of people can solve that you and your team can't and probably shouldn't be solving just by yourself. So it's not all bad, and with this in mind, I'm going to propose some criteria that we can use to evaluate whether a module is good enough to bring into your project. And of course, this is different for every project. If you're just building a hobby project for yourself, you probably don't even have to care about any of this because it's just for you. But if you're building an application which is going to be used by thousands or millions of users in production, then these are factors that you should definitely consider. So let's start with the more technical ones, and I'm not going to talk about size, controversial. So how intuitive is the API? So to me, this means how many lines of code is it going to take me to do a thing? How well named are the methods? Do they make sense? And does this make my life easier than if I were to implement it myself in pure Node? Also, are there tests? If I'm going to use someone else's code, I want it to be good. And tests aren't a foolproof way of knowing if code is good, but they do go some way towards giving me the peace of mind that it's not going to break my app in production. And onto the human side, what are the docs like? I want to be able to learn how to use an API without having to go digging through the source code. I want to know all the available methods, the parameters they take, and what they return. I'd love a quick start guide if that's too decadent. I'd love examples of using the module in different situations. If there's a tutorial, that's amazing. Another important one, is it maintained? This is, I think, maybe the most important one. I need a GitHub repository to show signs of life from at least the last few months, ideally in the last few weeks. So not just commits, but issues responded to, contributions accepted, new releases. I want to see reported problems being dealt with. And of course, I understand that maintaining software takes a lot of effort, and I very much respect the time of the people who are pouring their efforts into these projects. But if the sole creator of the module doesn't want to actively maintain it, hopefully they're engaging other people who will, or maybe it's a wild idea, maybe your company could support them to do it. That's the dream. But it has to be maintained in some way for this to be good enough to bring into my production app. A final one, are there people using it? So the number of NPM installs and GitHub stars are definitely not synonymous with quality, but it does mean that there are more people out there to answer your questions on Stack Overflow. It means there are going to be code examples of other people using it, maybe tutorials and blog posts, and other people are going to be reporting bugs before you run into them yourself, which is awesome. So usually, the more people that are using a module, the better it is for you. So here's our lovely criteria for evaluating a module. And now, we're going to put this into practice. And we're going to road test some packages. So I'm going to be showing you some self-professed, lightweight alternatives to some popular Node modules that you know and love. So we're going to look at two. And the first genre of package that we're going to look at is for image processing. So by image processing, I'm referring to a library that can transform images in various ways. So cropping, resizing, maybe adding some text, filtering them, changing it from a PNG to a JPEG or whatever you want. It's a problem that you'll probably come across at some point if you're building web applications. So needing a library to crop and edit images in Node was a problem that I encountered at work earlier this year. We were building this beautiful Slack bot called Coco, that would take images from fashion shows around the world and resize and crop them and deliver them to the picture editors in every Vogue website so they could go online. So that was the first time I encountered this problem. But today, for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to be building a bit of code that can make me a souvenir photo from NodeConf Argentina. So we're going to add a bit of text and some sparkles, and we're going to create something that I can treasure forever. So the popular Node module that I want to explore alternatives to is ImageMagick. So ImageMagick isn't actually one module. It's actually a piece of graphics processing software for which a number of NPM modules have been built to work with. ImageMagick itself has been around for a very long time. It was first created in 1987, which is before I was born, and before JavaScript was born, so we're both a bit too millennial for this. ImageMagick is written in C, and it's a command line interface primarily. You also might have heard of GraphicsMagick, which is a fork that came off ImageMagick about 15 years ago. So if you've done image processing, you've probably used ImageMagick. It's very popular and almost the de facto solution for image processing in a number of languages, and especially in Node. So there are 231 different packages out there for ImageMagick on NPM. And the top few have over 300,000 downloads combined in the last month. And the top one, with about 260,000 of those downloads, is called GM. GM describes itself as GraphicsMagick and ImageMagick for Node. It's essentially a wrapper library, and it provides the Node bindings for working with the ImageMagick software. So let's start evaluating this module. And the first thing we're going to do is look at the repo. It has nearly 5,000 stars. That's cool. Some nice, pretty badges. I love a good repo badge. We've got a test directory with actual tests. I looked. They seem legit. So that's exciting. So far, so good. Unfortunately, it looks like the last commit was over a year ago, which makes me sad. I do like the README. It gives lots of examples of using it in various ways, and even has an entire directory with examples of how to use it to do different transforms like blur or turn something charcoal. But anyway, let's give it a go. We've got this beautiful selfie that I took with Nikki, who's going to be speaking later. And we're going to add some text to it and a little sparkle to make it beautiful. So here we have some code using GM. We're going to pass in the path to the image, and then for the text, we want Helvetica to be the font. We want it to be magenta, obviously. The gravity is going to be south. That means that we want the text to be at the bottom of the image. Weird naming, but OK. And we want to draw the text, I heart NodeConf Argentina. So there's the text. Oh my God, there it is. It's beautiful. So now let's add some sparkles. I have a little PNG with some sparkles that we want to overlay on top of the image. So it was a little complicated to do this in GM. But there's this out method that I can use to kind of simulate what's happening in the command line. So I want to pass in the path to the sparkles. The geometry is where I'm defining where I want it to appear on the image. And then we're using the flag composite to say, put this on top. We write it to the file, and we have this beautiful souvenir image of me and Nikki at NodeConf Argentina that I will treasure forever. So why would I not use this module? Because that was an OK experience. I felt good about that. Well, there were the initial questions that I had about the maintenance, which was a bit sad. But also, what I forgot to mention was that in order to run this code, I actually had to install ImageMagick as an external dependency on my machine. So this meant for me on my Mac, I had to brew install ImageMagick. So that means that this is not in my Node modules, it's an external dependency. And so if I were to deploy this code, I would have to make sure that wherever it was deployed, I had ImageMagick installed. And deploying an application that's dependent on ImageMagick, I unfortunately know from experience, is not a nice thing to do. So not only do you have to install ImageMagick in your Docker file, you also have to specify you want C++ and a specific version of Python in order for ImageMagick to run at all. And ImageMagick also, I discovered, did not really follow Semver closely, so I had to pin down the version. So it was a bit of a pain, and I would rather avoid all of this if there was a better option. Oh my God, there's a better option. We're going to be talking about an alternative to ImageMagick that's called Sharp, which bills itself as high-performance Node.js image processing, which sounds great. It's not really true to call it a weird, obscure alternative, because it actually has 6,000 stars on GitHub, which is 1K more than the previous module. However, in terms of installs, it's been installed 150,000 times in the last month, which is about half that of the top ImageMagick modules. So it's still the underdog here. And the big draw card for me is that Sharp does not require you to install external dependencies. You can just install the module and go. So once again, the repo, as you see, I've started myself. Such a fan. Got nice stars. It's been updated recently. Not too many open pull requests. They even have nice things for contributors, like a contributing MD and some editor config. And the test directory, oh my God, it was so stunning. There are all these different types of tests, and even this beautiful badge which says 99% coverage, the dream. So let's look at the code and let's see how comparable it is. So this is me doing the same thing in Sharp as I just did in GM. So we pass in the path to the file, and then to do the text, it was a bit strange. There's no specific text method like there was in GM. So I had to create a text SVG, and then I just used the overlay with method, which just overlaid on top. And then I did the same with the sparkles. And then I wrote it to the file, and we have our beautiful souvenir image again. So that was cool. So which one would I choose? Would I use ImageMagick, or would I use Sharp? So I discovered, while exploring the API for ImageMagick, that it actually does a lot of really fun things. I can emboss an image, I can make it sepia, I can make it a negative, I can swirl our faces together. It did lots of cool things, and unfortunately, it was a lot more fun than Sharp. But do I need a fun module for my purposes? Unfortunately, probably not. If I wanted to do something elaborate, like turn a photo into a mosaic or make Instagram filters in Node, then maybe ImageMagick would be worth a few extra lines in my Docker file and an external dependency. But given I mostly just need to crop images and add some text, I don't think it's really worth it. I think Sharp is a sufficient choice for me. And I would say that if you're doing image processing, look to Sharp before you need to upgrade to something like ImageMagick. So the underdog wins. So in this case, it was worth looking at a nice alternative. So we're going to talk about another package now. And the genre of package that we're going to talk about is ORMs, which I wanted to talk about because it seems to have a certain history or mystique in the Node world, which I find quite intriguing. So by ORM, I'm referring to an object relational mapper, which we use to interact with our database in code. Not everyone uses an ORM. I don't always use an ORM, but it does have certain benefits. You don't have to write raw SQL. You can easily switch databases. You protect it against SQL injection. But I needed to use an ORM at work a year ago, and I started looking at the different ORMs that exist, and I found this Reddit thread that says, has anyone used an ORM with Node that they actually enjoyed? Be honest, please, which is a little pointed. And then I found this tweet which says, there is no Node ORM, period, for any tech. It's just not in Node culture. So I persevered despite all of these signs, and I discovered that there's a module called Sequelize that everyone seems to use. It has 700,000 downloads on NPM in the last month, and some of my friends were using it, and they said it wasn't that bad, so I persevered. The repo, lots of stars, lots of badges, recent updates, some nice contributor docs, so the community seems pretty strong. So let's try it out. So to test ORMs, I'm going to be combining my twin loves of JavaScript and drag queens. We're going to be building a JavaScript name generator. So we're going to be taking a list of drag queen names and a list of Node and JavaScript terminology, and we're going to be combining them to create a super nerdy drag name. So let's do this with the tiny code. So basically, I managed to set up the database and define my models in about 20 lines of code. So we want a queen model for the queen table, and we want a keyword model for the JavaScript keywords. So I bulk created some drag queen names and some JavaScript keywords. So that was nice. And Sequelize was great. It just automatically created the tables in my database, and that was great. So I didn't have to really expend that much effort. And then when I wanted to create the drag queen name, I just randomly got a drag queen name, I randomly got a JavaScript keyword, and then I mashed them together in a string. And then we created a name like the Event Loop Princess, or Lady Blockchain Bunny, which is a good one for our speaker from yesterday. Jaidynn, Async Await Diore Fierce. Great names. So, all in all, that was a pretty good experience. Thumbs up from me. I liked that. But can we beat that with something more lightweight? Let's have a look at one called Bookshelf, which is a frequent suggestion in a lot of forums on the internet. And I think the name is cute, so let's have a look. It describes itself as a lightweight ORM for Node built on top of the Knex SQL query builder. So the biggest draw card for me was its minimalism. Everyone says that it's less opinionated than Sequelize. So what does that mean? Bookshelf does not force you to describe the schema of your tables. So I'll show you what this means. This is what it took to describe our queen model in Sequelize. So you see we had to specify the first name of the queen and the last name of the queen and say that they were strings to validate that. When I did this in Bookshelf, it was literally 3 lines, and I just have to say that the table name is queens and move on with my life, and everything's fine. So I did that in about half as many lines. Bookshelf does not auto-generate the tables in my database, so I actually had to go and do that myself on the command line. So I had to go in and create the tables and all the columns, which is annoying, but I guess it was kind of indulgent that Sequelize did that for me in the first place. And Bookshelf lets you drop down to the raw Knex interface for custom queries. So that means that if I want to do something super fancy that Bookshelf can't handle, like I want to do an inner, left, right, join, something, then I can just use Knex and all the methods there to do that. So those are all the benefits. And I actually kind of like that it was quite hands-off. So it was just dealing with the data and not so much with like the structure. So the repo, lots of stars, recent commit, some red and yellow badges, not my favorite color. So I'm going to look down in the README more, and then I see right there it says, read the discussion about the future of Bookshelf. Oh no. So this made me a bit sad, and I started reading this thread about the future of Bookshelf. And I unfortunately gather that the project is not in its best state. The original creator has handed it off to the community, and whilst there are lots of people who are interested in developing it, there's a lack of experienced core contributors, and there's a backlog of issues and PRs, and some tech debt, and documentation that's out of sync, so it's really not in a great state. Which makes me really sad, because I was kind of getting into Bookshelf. I liked how simple it was, and it even had nice Lodash methods that I could generate my drag queen name with. So what's the verdict? So I see the benefits of Bookshelf. It was a lot more intuitive for me to use, but the lack of clarity about its future was kind of hard to get past. And if I were building like just a hobby project for myself, then I would totally use Bookshelf, because it's not really that important. But if I were building something with millions of users, like a JavaScript drag queen name generator, I would absolutely not be able to use Bookshelf because it's just too great of a risk. I'm really hoping that it goes okay, and I'm rooting for it in the future, so much so that I made a pull request to update one of its dependencies, and I became a contributor. But in this case, the popular module wins. And we only have time for 2 today, but there really are so many more lightweight alternatives that you can try, and you might be surprised to find that they might be a better fit for your project. So if you're using Lodash, why not try Lazy? If you're using Request, why not try Got? And if you're using Winston for your logs, why not try Bunyan? You never know. You might find something that's a better fit for your project. And here's what I learned. So for server-side modules, size is not as important as you think it is. Dependencies have a technical and a human cost, and you really have to consider both. And finally, well-maintained projects are almost always the better option, unfortunately. And these are some useful tools that you can use if you don't want to have to go digging through all the repos yourself. So there's npm compare, which gives you a top-level view of popularity and maintenance. There's npm trends, which gives you popularity over time. There's David DM, which gives you the security of a project's dependencies. And there's cost of modules, which will give you the size of all the dependencies in your project. And finally, if you would like to generate your own JavaScript drag queen name, you can go to javascriptnow.sh, and well, hopefully, I have no internet, but hopefully you have internet, and you can go and get your own drag name and start your stage career. So you're welcome. And that is it. Thank you.